going to be talking about community here tonight. Community is something that we're all involved in with the people we work with our families, and all the aspects of our everyday lives. And community is a word that we feel comfortable with, and yet for many of us it means different things. We're going to explore what it means to us, how we interact with it, and what it does to shape our lives. The second edition of Webster's Dictionary says a community is a body of people having common organization or interest or living in the same place under the same laws. We've invited 3 guests tonight to help us understand the concept of community. Karen Stupski from the Heathcote community in Freeland, Maryland. Elaine Bronez from the Mount Vernon Unitarian Church. And Keith Mitchell from the Community for Creative Nonviolence. Community, an elusive and nebulous topic, traditionally is defined geographically. Let's look at other ways we can think about community. 2 First Ladies, Hillary Rodham Clinton, titled a book, It Takes a Village, discussing children, and a former First Lady, Barbara Bush, said in her memoir, "Did you know that if a child never misses a day of school from 1st grade to 12th grade, he or she would have spent only 9% of his or her life in the classroom. The other 91% is spent in the home or out in the community." Do any of you have anything to add to how we've defined community so far? What makes your community a community, Keith?
Well, I think what makes CCNV a community is what you said earlier in the definition. We tend to live under one law, and the law that we live under is the law of nonviolence, faithfulness to our fellow man, and we just have come together in a nonviolent community where we don't want to see anyone at all suffering, whether they're homeless, whether they're housed, whether they're male, whether they're female, and I think that's our real oneness. And we share a lot, and to me, it's almost like that family, my extended family. And I don't think we're unique. I just believe that's the way the whole world should be.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to tell us what makes your community a community?
Well, the Mount Vernon Unitarian Church, I think, is pretty typical as a church. We have many interests that are shared, and a lot of groups grow out of that. For example, people who like music, we have a music committee, and we have a whole series of concerts. And the women's group, like in a lot of churches, tends to have, they have meetings and they make crafts, and we have a big holiday shop. And it's gotten so huge that everyone around the church comes into it. And they make these quilts each year, which the church is quite famous for. But nevertheless, I would call that a rather traditional concept of community, such as also people who are interested in gardening are in our Green Thumbers group, and we have other interest groups. What I'm hoping to see it develop into is including a larger sense of community, that is people outside of the church that we are caring about and concerned with, and who can come in the church and we can go out to them.
Okay, let's explore, Karen, your community.
Okay, my community is Heathcote Community. We're a group of 8 adults and 4 children who have come together to try to live in a more healthy way. So what we share are some commitments to caring for each other, caring for the earth. We try to live in a more sustainable way. We're a vegetarian community. We do organic gardening and try to grow a good bit of our food. Try to save energy. We're very committed to the children and trying to create a safe, healthy environment for them. And we also really want to stay connected to the wider community, and so we offer different educational events at our conference center that we run.
And why are you a part of your community? I'm going to start with Karen, and I'm going to ask you each.
Well, I guess for me, I was in the Navy for 2.5 years, and I was on a ship, and that was an experience of community there, living and working closely with 350 other people. And I thought that was really exciting, and that was one thing I loved about the military. And so when I left the military, I felt a yearning for that same closeness and that same commitment to a common purpose. And so I heard about the Intentional Communities movement, which is, it's basically, an intentional community is like a commune. And I found this book, it's the Directory of Intentional Communities. It lists, there's probably at least 600 of these across the US. And so I looked in the book, and Heathcote Community was listed there, and it was one of several that I looked into, and I went to visit, and I liked it, and so I moved in.
Thank you. Why are you a part of your community?
I joined our church back in the 60s when there was all the civil rights disturbances. And I felt I had to get in with a group of people who shared my concern for what was going on or what wasn't going on. And I was very proud of the fact that we got famous at that time. I don't know if you can see this, but we had CORE. A group from CORE came up to meet at our church and trained to do sit-ins. And that caused quite an uproar in the community. We were threatened, and the people on the board were told that they would have to go to jail if they didn't stop this immediately, but they didn't, and I was very proud of them. And ever since then, we've been trying to do things in the community. We've been in a lot of things with the Vietnam War, with the women's group, with all kinds of concerns. And just to bring it up to date, we started a group.
Are you part of this group?
Yes. This is, we were trying to figure out how to be more useful in the larger community. And we worked up this group, which is the Affordable Housing Corporation, which raises funds to help nonprofit housing groups. We give them the money
So for you, housing is a priority, finding housing.
Finding housing. And this is an interesting thing because it brought together all these people on here are members of different Unitarian churches. And so it's interesting because it brought together the whole Unitarian thing circling around the Beltway.
From the metropolitan area.
And this is the first, they've had committees meeting, but it's the first time they've had something that brings them all together.
And Keith, what brings you to your community?
Well, I guess my story is a little different. I guess I need to tell you a little bit about the community. First of all, we're the Community for Creating Nonviolence is around 85 people who are volunteers who actually have a license to run the largest shelter in the country. And we do international humanitarian missions. I came to CCNV as a homeless person. I used to work for AAA here in Fairfax County, and they relocated to Florida, and I was without a job and ended up living on the streets. So that's how I came to CCNV, and just the community spirit, people really caring about me and helping me turn my life around. I just started giving back, and basically that's why I'm a member of the community. But without question, they've showed me how to care about my own fellow man.
Has your view of what a community means changed as you've grown older?
Yes. Yes.
What has changed?
And I don't want to compare else was true because, as I said, when I came to CCNV, the only community I knew was, my mother, my father, and
your family.
My little family. And now I have so many families. I have nephews and I have so many uncles and other extended family members who are just members of the community who I really care about, and I really care about just like I do my other uncles and my other nieces.
Could we kind of say that you came to a community out of need, and the community met the need, and now you're part of providing the services for other people who have needs?
Yes.
So it's sort of a circle.
It's a circle, yes.
Well, it's
Elaine?
also a kind of a community of having had a, well, I was thinking of all these networking groups where they share a great experience of some sort. Yours was homelessness, it could be a veteran or an anti-war advocate. And sharing a big experience like that, you make a community.
Well, you said you've been involved in this since 30 years, since the 60s, whatever that is. Have you found that the community has changed to meet your needs as you've grown older?
Well, I found that I'm interested that don't you think there are a lot more networking groups and support groups and all kinds of getting together that never existed before? I mean, widows groups and you name it. If you have a certain disease, you can find other people with that disease. And I think it's a great development. But I think the most important thing is that we not have groups that are sort of ingrown, like a little hobby group or a fraternity type group that just sticks with itself. I think there's a big movement afoot for inclusiveness. At least in the Unitarian Church, they're pushing for that.
I don't know how long you've been with your community, but has it changed, or are you changing and getting different things from your community, or is your community providing different things for your needs as you grow older?
Well, I've been in my community for 3 years now, and actually the community itself has gone through a big change. It used to be women only, and I lived for a year with it being women only, and then the other women I was living with left, and I needed more people to come live with me, and so we opened the community up, and now we're mixed, and we've got 7 of the 8, are new. So it's been an experience of forming a community and getting to know each other better, and I guess the thing that has emerged out of that experience as being really important is learning to value our conflicts and realizing that being in community doesn't mean we're always all going to agree about everything, but that learning how to interact, how to work through our conflicts. And we're very committed to talking to each other about it and not just getting angry or withdrawing, but really communicating and working
That's interesting. A community can have something happen that makes people have different views on a subject, but there has to be a way to solve these problems. And you're solving it through talking with these people and other people in your community. But you're a small community.
Yeah.
And you're a larger community. When you have differences.
Communications, just like I said, it's the same thing, communications. And I believe that's the same thing in the wider community. I mean, the community of man. I mean, what we find is a lot of people go behind these barriers, and they do withdraw. They don't, say what's on their mind, and they really don't try to solve some of the problems that they have with each other. And we have some heated debates. I mean, and they could go on, like we have meetings on Saturday, it starts at 1 o'clock, and we could be there at 9 o'clock talking about one issue. With 85 people, when you have one thing that everyone is feeling real strong about which way the community should go, we will be there all day until, everyone decides this is the way we go. Otherwise, we won't do it at all.
Are there particular issues that cause problems in your community?
I would say the biggest issue that causes problems in our community is how to spend money. Money is the major issue.
Not how to get it?
Not how to get it, how to spend it. But I think more than anything, relationships. Relationships is deep down. Relationships is the number one besides money, and I think every little group has that money thing.
I should mention here that I used to work for the Operation Match, which is an outfit that's in all the jurisdictions around the Beltway to match up people to live together. And one of the first things we did was make up a sheet of paper when we interviewed people, what are they looking for and how are they going to solve their differences. We always included that in the interview because we said, now you're going to have differences. And how are you going to, you want to do this when it comes up, or do you want to sit down at the end of every month? And
Well, you mentioned early on that your church was involved in the civil rights movement and other things. Now, was everybody in the church supporting this, or were there some conflicts to be worked on?
there wasn't that conflict in the civil rights as much as in Vietnam. Some were for and some were against, so that was a problem.
Now, we live basically in a transient community, and it has been said that many people have left very small towns because they felt that they didn't have the freedom there to pursue their interests. And here we are in a big metropolitan area, and many people are now looking for community because they feel rootless, as it were. How do you feel about that?
Well, you know, I remember years ago, the mental health center sent volunteers out to interview people about what their mental health needs were, and they found out that the big problem that came over in all these interviews was that people didn't have anybody they could confide in or talk with. I mean, everyone in these middle-class communities wants to look good with their neighbors, and they never would admit problems. And I think having a place to go where you feel at ease and can share your interests of that, really important nature is important.
Now,
Good.
you're part of a relatively small community. How does this work in your community as far as people feeling their needs are met from the standpoint, do you use a lot of resources from the large area around you, or are you a self-sufficient group?
Well, we're not self-sufficient. I mean, we all have jobs off the land, and we're all connected to lots of other communities. Like the women in the community are very active in women's groups. The men have a men's group. A bunch of us are active in the lesbian and gay community. There's various ones involved in homeschooling, children's activities. So we have many communities we're involved with, and a lot of support outside the community, and I find that to be very essential because
All right.
it's easy to get isolated.
What do you look at as the future for communities? And maybe we can tag on to that question. What changes do you see with, for example, with technology coming in? Is that going to affect how your community works?
Well, I'm hoping that technology will be able to help people communicate a little bit better. And I'm worried. I'm worried that it's going to make people get more and more withdrawn,
Isolated
in their own little community, their smaller community. But earlier, just a few minutes ago, when we were talking, I think what we realized is that we're really interdependent, and that's the main reason why we realize we need other people. We need to have people care about us, and we need to have people who we really could trust and believe in and have that support. And I think that's what I'm hoping that technology will really be able to give people the freedom to reach out.
What do you think about
computer
technology?
networking is terrific. My son got me and my husband involved in that.
Are you on the net? You cruising the net?
And it really is a way of contacting the whole world, all kinds of groups. And I was reading that they gave computers to some homeless and got all into it.
Oh yeah, we have computers at CCNV. We have a guy who's getting ready to graduate from college from using computers.
All right.
So it really
Wow.
helps.
It really helps.
That's great.
It really does.
The future? How do you look at your community in 15, 20 years?
Oh, well, we hope to grow. We'd like to get up to around 35 to 50 members. But I guess my personal vision is I'd like to see us be more connected to the city of Baltimore. I'd like to see us have an urban group house, because I think that in the city is where more changes need to be made to move our society into a more healthy, sustainable society.
All right, and let me ask you, do you have one last thought about community? What would you say if we wanted you, what haven't you said that you'd like to say?
Well, I think I've said almost everything I like to say about community. I wish people would come down to CCNV, see what we're doing. We're not that far from Northern Virginia, and we work with a lot of the shelters in Northern Virginia, and basically I think that's how we have to live in our societies, work together.
Yes, so here in the Alexandria and Fairfax County area, there's Carpenter Shelter, which is one of the
and
large.
also Christ House, we work with also.
That's right.
The Unitarian Church is very busy nationally trying to start more of the intentional communities, particularly they started with gays and lesbians, and we have this welcoming committee that's been working very well. And now they're trying to get into more diverse groups and make all kinds of minorities feel welcome, and elderly or handicapped or whatever. We're trying to really
They're looking for a movement of inclusiveness.
inclusiveness is the key word.
The key word?
And diversity.
That
These
sounds
what
like a
you
good
hear a lot.
formula for future growth and success, doesn't it?
I hope.
And what do you feel about?
Well, I think that the way that we're going to solve the problems confronting us in our society is by working from the bottom up, grassroots, and just people coming together to help each other. So I just want to encourage people to get out there and get involved.
In their community,
Yeah.
as they see their community, either a geographic group or an interest group
Right.
or anything of that type?
Right.
Yes.
All right. Well, I hope you will think about how the changing world we live in will impact your community and your place in it. It sounds like you've all given a lot of thought to the idea of community. You're involved with community, and it sounds like it's been a core part of your life, contributing to your communities and receiving sustenance for your souls from your communities.
That's
I mean,
right.
what I'm hearing here is an interaction between you and your community. I mean, it's going both ways.
It is.
And it's kind of exciting because it's not something's done to you, and it's not something you're doing. It's something working from both sides.
Yes, we need the community as much, and we try to pay it back and help a little.
And sometimes maybe working in the community is good for one's own self and
Right,
one's own
definitely.
learning and one's own feeling of being part of something.
Yes. Yes.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us tonight. It's been a great pleasure, and perhaps we have formed a micro community here of our own
Yes, we
tonight.
have. Yes, we have. Thank you for having us
Yeah,
also.
thank you.
We'll have to come and visit.